Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Mental Health segment with Geminme. Geminme is my company, and my name is Catherine Ferreira. I am the founder of Geminme, and the Geminme objective is to empower, inspire others, and to become the best version of themselves. While we grow, we heal, we discover ourselves. We also promote networking and developing our dreams. Remember, the power is within you. Mental health for me is such an important topic. We often take it for granted, really. And I know it for a fair awakening moment of my own. I was recently diagnosed with ulcers, which many people don't know. It's ulcers in my stomach. And when the doctor told me, he insisted that is constant intake of ibuprofen or painkillers. And I told him, no, it's not related to that. I don't take ibuprofen. I don't know what you're talking about. And I really, that was an awakening moment for me. I was like, I know what it is. It's anxiety, it's depression, it's stress, childhood traumas, all built up in my gut and holding for years. And really, I wasn't really paying attention to my stomach. I wasn't eating. I didn't eat breakfast. I ate like at 4, 2, different times. And now when I had the diagnosis, I realized that I really had to take care of myself. So for all these personal reasons, I really wanted to promote that and kind of share that experience with everybody, because I feel like not everybody knows what you're going through, and that could actually help somebody else. So I really encourage everybody who's going through something like this or very similar to seek help, therapy, look within yourselves, try to heal all your traumas, try to relax, have time for yourself, which is very important. And it makes a difference in your relationship with yourself, your surroundings, your outcomes, and your relationship with others, which is very important. And you will see many differences in your life. So if you want to talk more about your journey or how to improve your mental health, you will learn some of that today. And I'm also able to talk about that offline. So I want to thank Giselle Matos today that she's joining us. And I want to continue to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month and World Mental Health Day. And this is why we're here today, because we want to raise awareness and to tell everybody that mental health is something very important. So Giselle Matos is a Dominican born and raised in Queens and Brooklyn, New York. She is currently a therapist in Brooklyn, New York, and she graduated from University of Albany with a master's in mental health counseling. She currently works at a high school, helping high school students navigate one of the toughest years of their lives. Thank you so much for being here today on a Friday night. I really appreciate your time and presence.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions that are very important and dear to my heart. I try to navigate them and put them together just to get some insight of your mental health insights and what you think about it. So how important it is for mental health for you and wellness?
So mental health is definitely number one. Obviously, I'm a therapist and that is what I do, but I think it's really important for everybody to focus on their mental health. You cannot continue living in the same cycles. And that's what we do as human beings, right? We keep going the same cycles, the same routines. And unless we looked into ourselves, and that's what I see as mental health, is like looking into yourself, seeing what's going on and learning from it. So it's very important because that's how you break those cycles. It's by learning about yourself and learning about your environment and the people in your environment. Very solely are we alone, right? It's usually with the family, usually with friends, and chosen people that we have decided to be part of our lives. So it's also looking into those relationships. But it's very important to have mental health because, as you said, if you ignore it, then it becomes something else. So what you said is actually a somatic symptom. So a lot of times in the Latinx Hispanic culture, we keep quiet, and when we keep quiet, then that becomes a somatic symptom, which is a part of your body takes on that pain. So it could be repeated headaches, it could be repeated stomach aches, your leg always hurts, and that's something that has been proven that it does impact the Latinx Hispanic culture a lot more, and also the Black community as well. So it's definitely something that if we talk about it and help decrease that anxiety and like the traumas and many other things, then that could actually help your somatic symptoms as well.
Oh, wow. It's so amazing what you just mentioned because, I've seen it myself, but I also wanted to take the chance and recommend this to our listeners. So there's a documentation in Netflix, it's called Healing, and it's about many people who are diagnosed with cancer, different, illnesses, and they realize that it's linked to their traumas, and it is real. Like these things happen. And I just thought of it as a public health professional. It's like, we have so many conditions that are so prone to like our Latinx, communities, but we haven't really stopped and thought like, oh, like is all the traumas, all the things that we carry and all like the lack of communication, the taboo that we have in mental health, like people don't heal, people don't talk about it. Like this might be like one of the biggest reasons why people are like so prone to diabetes, hypertension and all these awful things that happen to us. So this is actually great that you mentioned that. Thank you for sharing that. So I also wanted to ask you, why did you choose to be a mental health counselor?
So I decided to be a mental health counselor because I wanted to make a difference and I wanted to help other people. I feel like there are many jobs and many ways you can help. But for me, I feel like mental health counseling and learning people's stories and helping them, like I said, look into themselves and reflect on themselves is what I found was the way I could do it. I also feel like I work with young adults because I don't really call them children, they're young adults. And I think they're in such a vital time in their life where this is the time to change. This is the time to see who you want to be, who you were, who you are, and who you want to be. Um, so I really like that part of helping another person.
Wow, that's amazing. So powerful, really, because if you think about it, that's when it all starts. You think that, I mean, childhood is really important and I think is vital to our patterns and everything that we do. But high school is like the starting point to the future, right? It's like, okay, what do I do now? Who am I? What do I like to do? What do I want to do for the rest of my life kind of thing,
Yeah,
which is a big responsibility on a high school student, I think. But yeah, we make it happen. So do you enjoy your job?
I do enjoy my job. I think it's very fulfilling because I have seen changes in people and it seems like a small change at that moment, but when we look back, I'm very much about assessments and like doing tests where we give an actual number for anxiety, depression, and trauma, and then comparing that number months later. And a number is just a number, but it does help them see, like, oh, yeah, I have changed. And then I have them reflect on what has changed in the past few months. So it is small changes, but they do add up.
Yes, one step at a time. So that's great. That's great that you're making an impact. It might be a small scale, but you never know if you're like counseling the next president of the United States, right? So
Maybe
they
I
they
am.
that's so great. So what recommendations do you have for future generations who want to pursue mental wellness as their career?
Mm. So people who would like to pursue it as a career, I would definitely say starting with yourself. Go see a counselor, go see even groups because groups are a really great thing. Obviously, with COVID, it may look different now and it may look like here on Zoom, but groups are really important because you do learn about yourself and about others, and just reflecting on other people's situations can help you reflect on your own. So, kind of starting with yourself. There's so many pieces, people, parts of the mental health journey and so you would like to see what part you would fit into best, whether it's being a counselor, whether it's being a psychiatrist, whether it's being a receptionist and these kind of jobs. And there's so many different settings. For example, there's school-based settings, there are clinics, there's like inpatient where it's a hospital and people would be there for depends on like a week or maybe for months. It really does depend on what kind of setting you're interested in as well. But number one is to first see on yourself what you would like to do, and also going to college and going into programs that you feel like would reflect on what you would like to do.
Yeah, that's actually a good advice because I recently have thought of going into that route because I really enjoy therapy and just like being able to help others. And I find myself sometimes just like, helping others with advice or like reflecting on their situations and like, you know, I kind of am a counselor of my own, not certified, but so I've been thinking, I'm like, okay, and I asked my therapist because I have therapy, I have my own therapist. And she's like, oh, we have to look into like different ones because I don't want to go for my doctorate. I know that for sure. I did my master's and I think I got enough of that.
Yeah.
But you know, doing another master's, perhaps I can probably, you know, compromise and do that and be part of, you know, 2-year program where I could be like, okay, yeah, I could do this for, you know, I did public health, so it's not so foreign to it, right? I could probably
Yeah.
do some classes and, you know, be a therapist. So yeah, do look into the different types of therapists because they do have a large like variety of therapists.
I
So
did
what?
want to add one more part to that as
Yeah,
well, because there's also the research side. So a lot of people think about like, reflecting yourself, but also there's research that tells us what are the best theories and, how the human mind works. And they need people in the labs, right? That's not me, but they need somebody.
yes, I agree. That is, and I think for research, you actually need a PhD for that, right?
Depends on the level, and also what job you want at the research clinic.
Yeah. PhD. That sounds good, but not really. Okay, so what tips do you have to improve our mental wellness or well-being?
I would definitely say taking time for yourself. As I said, we work, New York City, we take the trains, we come home, and it's usually with other people. So taking time to yourself, if it's going to watch a movie by yourself, going to take a walk in the park, staying at home, just doing things on your own, because I think you should date yourself first, and just spending time with you. I would also suggest, like I said, we do live in a society, so spending time with people that you enjoy spending time with. Um, as we know, a lot of people choose their friends and they become family. So choosing the people that you want to spend time with, the people who make you the better person, and spending time with those people, and also just having fun, because it doesn't always have to be like a heavy topic, right? Um, and just also finding a balance between life and work, because with COVID, something, a lot of people were working remotely, and it is very hard to distinguish work life and home life when you're working from home. So I definitely say for the people who are still working remote to be able to distinguish that, and the people who are not working remote to work on leaving work at work. And once you come home, it's a different hat, as we say.
Yes, it's very important. Actually, I work remote and it's often hard to like separate myself from work because it's like, and even like for my brand, my company, I'm a travel agent too. So it's like, I'm always working constantly. Like if it's not my, 9 to 5 job, I'm working on something else. So sometimes we get caught up in that and we have to really pay attention to ourselves or like loved ones, having fun, like you mentioned, going out, being out, taking a walk, breathing air, like fresh air, is often like not looked at or frowned upon. Oh, I don't have time, but we have to make time for those things because, life kind of goes and next thing you know, you have an ulcer.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it wasn't, very severe. It was like the early stages, but it could have been worse. And, we were trying to prevent that. So, it's a lesson for me, and I hope others who are listening do learn from it. Like we have to pay attention to our body, we have to pay attention to ourselves and what we want, and drink water. Sometimes we don't drink water. I try to have bottles of water all over the house so I can remember myself to drink water. Something also that I wanted to mention, do you have any like rituals or like meditation or like journaling or like soaks in the tub or something that you use or that you would recommend others to do, like to kind of unwind and like come back to themselves?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is self-care. Like, how do we do self-care? So when I did work from home, something that I did was I would close the computer, put it in a bag, and leave it in a different room, or some people don't have that ability, but in the closet, just out of sight, out of mind. And then it would be leaving the room for a bit. If it's going to the kitchen, going outside, if that's a, a possibility as well. So definitely, like you said, taking time, taking a shower, taking a bath, also eating. Because sometimes we work so hard that we forget that we need to nourish our bodies in order for our minds to work. So taking a time to make a snack, or if it's dinner time. Also, meal prepping is very important because sometimes, we're running, and we don't really get to eat. So meal prepping, so you have something, even if it's only just a few meals. But I definitely think writing, I suggest for everybody. I have one of those journals that you write one time in a day, and it's questions about yourself. So some of them are more deep, some of them are a little bit more silly, and it's just to write. Some people don't like to write, some people like to draw, and there's also drawing books that you could do, like do one drawing a day. And reading, right? Also TV. Sometimes we forget how important it is just to escape. And so that's what I see as reading or TV, is a chance to escape for a little bit, and to distract yourself from the stresses of regular life, right? Um, and like I said, spending time with people that you care.
Thank you. These are only the beginning of tips, like you can go online and like Google different ways of like unwinding or like self-care. And I also post different tips. I will be posting also related to this event, the ways that you can unwind or self-care and heal also. Do you recommend people to see a therapist? I know you mentioned that a little bit early on, but how important you think it is for somebody to seek therapy?
I think it's really important. I think that in the Latinx Hispanic culture, we're programmed to think, oh, only people who are very severe go to seek help. And I don't think that should be true. I think people should seek help when it's, a low to medium problem, when it's still something that maybe bothers them, but before it becomes a major issue. Um, I also think people should seek therapy when they're going through major changes. For example, like we said, high school, going to college and transitioning, or some people don't go to college, so going to vocational schools, going into the work field, just helping with that transition when people change life and they start thinking about families and partners and long-term partners, or also when they're having a child, whether it's biologically, adoption, fostering. I think it's good to see where you are and help yourself through these different changes. Also major work changes, right? Because some people change career paths, and also when people are retiring and going into a different phase in their lives. Actually, 65-year-old white men are the most at risk for suicidal ideation, and also just in general, the ages between 15 and 25, roughly. Those are the most at risk for suicidal thoughts and actions. So that is when, it's time to reflect. I think a lot of people don't know that it's 65, because that's usually when people retire. So I think, like I said, it's whenever you go through a different stage of your life, and these are just some examples, right? There's always things that happen. Maybe it is time to reflect back, as you said, in old traumas and childhood traumas, and just also being ready for change. Because if you go to therapy and you're not ready for change, you need to be there, and you need to be able to take in the information. So it's also being ready for that change as well.
Yeah, that's actually a good advice you gave. And therapy is like two-way street, right? The therapist could try to help you and give you tools, but if you're not willing to change or like heal, it's not going to work. And I think those are one of the main reasons why have to be ready and accept help and be able to talk about your issues, being open about your issues. What do you want to change? How your relationships are. be real with yourself and the therapist, because if not, then it's not going to work. But honestly, I feel like mental health is so important that it should be like primary care, right? Like preventive.
Mhm.
It should just be like as part of primary care, plan of care. Be like, okay, you have your physical, everything is good, you're you're physically good, but are you mentally good? Like, let's do an
Yeah.
assessment about that. Because I feel like even in changes, I think changes are drastically important, and could be like a trigger to a breakdown or something, right? But we all go through things like through our lives, and just like a daily thing, it should be like normal. Mental health, it
Yeah.
should be like the normal thing. Like, you're just enrolled and you have like a therapist by your side, and anytime you're feeling sad or down or depressed or feel anxiety. So I think it's very important to do that. Actually, you mentioned something about the Latinx and our Latin community, and it kind of speaks to the taboos that we have. I wanted to talk about that because at first, when I was sharing with people that I had therapy, I was like, oh yeah, I have a therapist. Like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, what's wrong? I'm like, life? Like, yeah, this is life. Like, I need to talk about my things, and I feel like in our culture, it's like a taboo to have a therapist. Like you said, they think that you have to be very severely like ill to be able to seek therapy, but it's not like that.
Yeah.
So I
I
want you to
agree.
kind of talk about like what it has been your experience as a mental health professional of like, our community kind of being dismissive about therapy.
Yeah. Um, I definitely agree that some people understand that, like we said, it doesn't need to be the biggest problem that ever existed, but it can also just be changes and just needing someone there for you, because that's what it is. It's about support. Um, so I definitely think that it's something that I would like for that to change. I want for the next generation for it to be more like, oh, okay, you're having someone there to support you, and it's called therapy, you know? The same way we hope that our families and our friends will support us, why not a stranger who has an unbiased opinion and can kind of tell you, you know, they're not supposed to tell you all their opinions, but could kind of reflect and see what maybe you and your family might not see, or your friends. Um, so I definitely think that it's something that I hope changes in the community. And I think as generations go on, I think it will change. Um, I also think that we need to reflect on the older people in our generations as well, because as I said, when they get older, it is a question of, what do I do now? I retired, now what? And I think those are the people that maybe family therapy would be good for, because maybe they won't go by themselves, but maybe as a family working on those dynamics, maybe they will. Um, and I think family therapy for everyone would be good.
Yeah, it's actually a good point that you brought up. So I think, yeah, like our generation, I would say, and going forward, are very aware of mental health and how important it is. Is like, like I said, a primary care, physician. But like we have to kind of teach and like kind of backtrack, okay, our parents and then our grandparents, right? And as far as we can, to kind of be like, this is normal. Like, this is something that, maybe you should do it. Maybe you kind of break that generational curse that we have, and those barriers or those traumas that kind of come through generations and have affected us too. And communication. I think communication is like crucial, like really. Just like I think part of the healing process for me has been like being able to tell people how I feel about them, or like how I feel about them, and our relationship, how could we improve it, like what hurt me, communication is key. Like, you will feel better. Yes, I told my mom this and that. Yes, I told my dad this and that, yes, I told my sister this and that, and being able to be open about it. I think that's part of the healing process. So I would totally encourage that to be. And we'll probably change people's perspective about, mental health in our community. I think that's a great taboo. And like you said, it's not only the Hispanic community, it goes abroad, like, Caucasian, like you said, older Caucasian men are more prone to be suicidal, and it's crazy how, unaware or how we kind of neglect. So we also have a question in the chat from Samantha. So she wants to know, how can you work on self-care when you struggle with attachment issues, or if you are an overthinker?
Okay. So with overthinking, like you said, it is about attachment and not feeling secure. So it's about having a conversation with whomever that is. If it's a partner, if it's a parent, if it's your own child, or friends, like having a conversation about, I'm feeling insecure because, and then them saying, oh, I didn't know you felt this way, and kind of working together in that. And I think that would be part of the self-care, because it's okay to miss someone when you're doing your things on your own, right? Like it's okay to think about them once in a while, but it's also self-care, I think sometimes needs to be on your own too. Because that will help with the attachment, knowing like I can do my own thing and this person will still be there, whomever they are, when I'm ready to come back. And having that conversation. For example, I use, like, if you're in an argument, sometimes it's okay to say, okay, we need to pause this for 5 minutes. Let me go cool down, and everyone cools down, and then coming back to talk about that situation. Because with attachment issues, some people think that, oh, they're arguing about this and it's about me. But maybe it's not about you. Maybe that person just had a really bad day. So it's like noticing when you need that moment, but also noticing when maybe that person that you're speaking to needs a moment as well, and suggesting like, okay, let's say these 5 minutes. And I think that's part of the communication and the self-care, because how can you care for yourself if you're really busy thinking about, what is this person doing? So yeah.
It's actually a great point that you brought up. It's like you have to take care of yourself first to be able to take care of others. And don't let others, behavior or actions really like impact your, happiness, your zen, your vibe, however you want to call it. Because sometimes, like you said, people do certain things and you're like, oh my God, it's towards me, like it's my fault or whatever. But it really isn't your fault. It's a reflection of them. And however, whatever they're going through, they may have a bad day or they're not really feeling it or whatever it is, but just don't take it upon yourself to like feel down because of what they did or what they said. So I've learned that the hard way.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes it could be your fault too, right? Like, because sometimes, it might be someone telling you, hey, I didn't like that you did this. But it's also saying my behavior is not always me, right? Like we cannot control the thoughts that come into our head, but we can control what we do with them. So if we start to overthink and then we start to think, oh, we must do this, 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 and that, we're like, wait, hold on. Is it something that I did? Is it something that you did? And kind of also balancing that sense too, because I mean, we're not perfect. None of us are. So it's like sometimes it might be you.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I want to open the floor. Samantha kind of started our Q&A. If we have any other participants that would like to, ask a question, you can unmute yourselves. If Samantha has another question, please go on and ask. This will be our Q&A.
I have a question.
Hi, Samantha.
Okay, so hi. When you said about the overthinking, like for me, I overthink a lot, and I know that like sometimes the thoughts come, but I don't know how to like know the difference of when they're my thoughts or when they're not.
So when they're your thoughts and when it's like the overthinking thoughts.
Yeah.
I definitely think that takes time. You're not gonna know just off the bat, but I think sometimes writing it down and literally looking at it and being like, am I really upset because of this, or am I upset because of something else, or is it like, is this something that is realistic? So for example, if let's say you texted your friend and your friend didn't text you back, the overthinker might think like, oh, did I do something to make them mad? Was it something I said yesterday? And then you kind of look back and like, or is there something else going on here? Maybe your friends at work and they're busy. Maybe they're at school and they're busy, or maybe they need a self-care day where they're not responding to everyone. So it's also giving yourself that time to reflect on what's going on. And sometimes writing can help with that. Like I said, drawing too, because not everyone's a writer. So drawing about it as well. And then also saying like, hey friend, are you okay? You haven't really responded. You know, maybe the next day, like, oh, are you okay? Is everything good? Because maybe in that moment, your friend needs your support as well. Does that kind of answer your question, maybe?
Yeah, and I have one more thing. So me personally, I feel like I've been struggling with putting my needs first. Like sometimes, like with meditating, I always like want to meditate in the morning, but it's kind of hard. Or like even like journaling, but I don't know how to like take myself serious and like do it.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is also what time of the day you're doing it, right? So if in the mornings you're running around and you can't really do much, maybe that's not the day. Maybe that's not the time of the day. So a lot of us ride the train, right? If we live in New York, and if you drive to work, like taking that to be the time of like, I'm going to be sitting here for half an hour. Let me write down, or if you're driving, maybe you think about it, still being safe. Like thinking about what's going on, how am I feeling, and just reflecting on yourself. But it's also okay to do it afterwards, right? So if it's every day before bed, if it's every day at 8 p.m. or something, or right after you get home from work or during dinner time, kind of seeing what time of the day is this the best time for you to do these things. Because you're right, sometimes in the morning there's just too much happening, and you can't.
I also wanted to add to that because I have the same issue. I've been trying to meditate and journal myself, and I can't get myself, early enough from bed that I can do all these things before I start work. So that's something that been trying to improve on. And really, like, I just took that advice. It's like maybe the morning, I'm not a morning person, so that it's one of my flaws. And as many people say, like successful people say, you have to, get started early, get ahead of others and have time in the morning. That's how you kind of set your set the day, basically, set the tone of the day when you start your day and you're like so productive and you have your goals straight, what you're going to do. So, try to work around it. If you could do it in the afternoon, in the night, whatever works for you. And then if you're like, you know what, I could wake up an hour earlier and just meditate. Just try to see what works for you. Try little by little. Just don't force yourself to do something that you feel like gonna be like, disoriented or something. Try to see what works for you. And in terms of like trying to please everybody else and not pleasing yourself, I've also struggled from that. So I kind of wanted to talk about that. Sometimes you just have to look inside of you and try to like, quiet the noise around you and all the requests. And could you do this for me? And could you take me here? And could you buy me this? And could you this? And could you that? Like sometimes you just have to be like, no, like I have to do what I want to do, because if you try to like spread yourself too thin and do everything for everybody else, you're not going to have time for yourself. And if you don't have time for yourself, you're not going to take care of yourself. And then eventually you're going to be sick and you're not going to be able to do anything for anyone, not them, not you, not anybody. So think about yourself. Don't overthink everything. When I was younger, I used to overthink everything. And sometimes you're like, oh my God, like, do I want to call this person? Do I want to write this email? Like, I'm like so shy. I can't really talk to this person. This person is, a supervisor, a manager, a CEO. And I'm so nervous. Like, how am I going to talk to this person? Just like sit down and be like, you got this. You're going to be able to do it. You're going to be able to talk to this person. You're going to be able to do this presentation. You're going to be able to do whatever you want to do, because you're scared as you do it, but just do it with fear. Just do it. Get up and do it. And then once you're done, you're going to be like, oh, it wasn't even that bad,
Sometimes all you need is 5 seconds of courage.
Yes. I hope that answers your question, Samantha. Does anybody else have a question?
Before we go to anyone else, I did want to add, so you had mentioned that sometimes we're encouraged to work early. Not every person can do that, right? Like some people, their bodies are just meant for later on in the day. So it's also finding what time is best for you. And this also goes for schoolwork and, just paperwork. Like, is it best for you to do your paperwork in the morning when you come in so you don't have to speak with anybody? Or is it best for you to do it in the night or later on in the day so that, in the mornings, that's when you do everything, and kind of seeing which ones work for you, right? Yeah.
Yeah, not everything works for everybody. So we kind of, like you said, just see what works for you. Any other questions?
I have a question. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Bianca. Thank you for being here. Thank you so
Hi.
much, everybody, for being here. I know you guys arrive a little later, but thank you for being here.
You're welcome. My pleasure, as always. I have a question. I would like to know how to cope with different communication style, like with your family members or with a friend. Sometimes that can be a little contradicting and it causes a lot of conflict because sometimes you don't know how to approach the situation. I would like to know what is the best way to know how to address like a situation, because I tend to not address my problems with someone because I don't know how to say it properly, or sometimes I tend to overthink a lot. um yeah, I would like to know like some sort of guidance or advice that you can give me.
Yeah. So I think it all comes from a place of honesty, right? So if it's something big, like your friend did something to you and you really need to address this, saying like you just said, like, I want to talk about this. I might not say the best way, but like, I'm gonna try my best. And then talking about it. Also, before you have that conversation, checking in with the person. So kind of saying like, hey friend, I really want to talk to you about something. Um, do you have time today? And sometimes they won't, and maybe you set up a time of like, okay, this is when you're going to have this conversation, because it's also given the importance to that conversation instead of just like, passing by, and then they might feel like, oh, why is this coming out of nowhere? So kind of giving them that forewarning too, because like I said, some people, maybe their friend is having a bad day today, but maybe tomorrow they're in a better mood to receive your information. um, so kind of like I said, coming from a place of honesty and saying like, this is something that's bothering me. I might not say it the best, but I'm going to try and say it. And realizing that when there's an issue, sometimes it's the issue, not the person, right? So like sometimes you're fighting with about something. Is it really about something the person did, or is it the person? And kind of maybe distinguishing that for yourself too, before you go into this conversation. Um, but yeah, different communication styles, like I said, preparing each other can help with not being defensive, because everyone needs to be in this like calm place in order to have these harder conversations. Um, but I also think that some people just communicate differently. Like some people like to text their situations. I'm not a person of those, but I would prefer to talk. But some people, they might feel like texting is how they can say everything they need to say. Or another option is also writing it down. Like, the two people deciding, okay, we're going to write everything down, and maybe reading each other a letter of what's going on. And while you're doing that, also reflecting on the other person's point of view as well. And maybe taking a moment to like just receive the information, and then taking a moment to respond, and then reading the other letter. And these are just some examples, but communication, it takes two people, and two people who are agreeing to have this communication. Because like I said, if you're just there eating and your friend comes at you with this major life issue that they have with you, that's not going to go very well. So you kind of have to both be on the same playing field.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I will take that as a consideration. And that's something that I realize that I have to work on. My communication skills sometimes is not that well because I tend to battle my feelings. Like I don't
Mhm.
really express it. And sometimes I could come up a little bit defensive towards the situation. So that's something I'm aware that I have to work on, because some in life, part of growing up is accepting your flaws, like sometimes things can be miscommunicated because you might, like you said before, maybe you're not the problem, is the issue. But I feel like sometimes we also have to admit when we have to work on ourselves as well to be
Yeah.
a better person.
I definitely agree that sometimes you gotta reflect on yourself too. And knowing maybe, like you said, if you're a person who, if someone's telling you something, you get defensive, taking those 5 minutes of like, or even 2 deep breaths, like, okay, what am I feeling right now? Am I feeling this because they're telling me something negative about myself? Or am I feeling this because I don't like that part about myself? Like kind of reflecting on what's going on. And like it's taking 5 minutes. If you need 5 minutes to calm down and just relax for a second, that's also okay. Because if you're both coming from the defensive place, you're not gonna go anywhere, right? But writing might help because then you could kind of write down what you're feeling, what were the emotions that happened, and also not holding it in, right? Because let's say if your family member does something small today, and then they do something small tomorrow, and then they do something small the next day, by the fourth day, you explode because, it's been days of little things adding up. But versus if maybe the first day you don't say anything, the second day is like, okay, I'm not liking that you're doing this. Like, what's going on? Because if we bottle it up, all that's gonna do is explode eventually.
Yes, that's actually true. I will thank you so much for the advice. I will work on it. Thank you.
And also coming from a place knowing that we're all still healing, right? And we're taking steps to heal ourselves. But knowing that I'm coming from a place of healing, sounds like you're coming from a place of healing. Catherine is also coming from a place of healing, and we're not gonna get it right all the time, you know. So also being compassionate to yourself and to the other person. Yeah.
That's true. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your question, Bielka. Do we have another question or Giselle? Yeah.
Oh, I wanted to add on to what she said because I struggle too, but I want to know how can I fix like my communication skills or like how can I communicate with a parent? Because you said friends, but I want to know like with the parent as well.
Yeah, parents can be harder sometimes too, because it's a weird place of power, right? Because your parent is your guardian and they're supposed to be protecting you, but it is a weird place of power. So I would definitely suggest kind of seeing where you're comfortable, but also safety is always an important thing. So if safety wise you need someone else there, or for support too, like maybe you need a third person to kind of help you explain what you want to say, but also saying like, hey parent, I want to talk to you about something, and I don't want I want us to be able to have a conversation about it. I wouldn't say don't get mad because that makes people get mad, but maybe saying like, I want to have a conversation about it, let's both put our input. So having a third person can help, but also knowing that this third person is there as support, not to kind of be in the middle. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, not for it to be like, oh, did you hear what they said about me? No, it's more like, okay, I'm hearing that you're saying this and she's saying this. And also reflecting that, like, I hear you say this. Is that correct? And then maybe your parent says like, no, what I meant was this. Because sometimes with parents, we might not understand what they're trying to say. And also saying like, okay, when you say this, it makes me feel like this. And putting that part into it too, like first clarifying, because like I said, sometimes when our parents might become defensive, and vice versa, like clarifying what they meant, because sometimes it get lost in translation, right? But yeah, does that kind of answer your question, or do you have another part to that same question?
Yeah, I think it answers it, but I kind of struggle with like the transition words. Like I feel like I'm aggressive sometimes, like when I talk to my mom about my emotions. So I don't know what words to use so she won't feel defensive.
Yeah. And noticing that you're aggressive in that communication style is important, right? Because that's the first step to change it. So maybe saying like, maybe giving a code word, or like, if she feels like, oh, you're being aggressive in the situation, maybe she says like, okay, hold on, pause, let's rephrase that, and kind of talking about that pre-conversation, like setting ground rules of how this conversation will go, so that you're not feeling offensive, like aggressive, and vice versa, right? So maybe setting that ground rule, like, okay, if my mom says pause for a second, then I'm going to pause, re-say my words, because sometimes in situations we say things and we didn't mean to say it that way. So maybe give yourself that chance to hold on, let me change how I said that, and taking a breath too. Writing might also help.
Thank you. Oh,
Writing might also help, because then you will kind of write down what you want to say, and then it won't really, you'll kind of reflect to make sure there's no aggressive tone in it, and then you kind of have what you want to say beforehand, right?
Yeah, I also wanted to add something. So I had a very deep conversation with my mom a couple months ago, and something that I've been thinking about having this conversation forever. And I never really built up the courage until I was in therapy, and I felt like me and my therapist were talking about doing it for weeks at a time, and I'm like, okay, it's time for me to do it now. And my therapist was like, you don't know how she's gonna react, but you can set the tone, like starting. So you're gonna be tell her like, oh, like I've been wanting to tell you something for a very long time. I want you to listen to me. I want you to just like listen to me, and then you can respond. This is not like an argument. This is just conversation. And this is very important to me. So I want you to listen to me. And then, you talk for how long ever you want to talk. And then however she's feeling, she might be able to bite her tongue for a couple minutes, or she might react to you. You can't control that. That's out of your control, unfortunately. But you could try to be passive about it, not trying to like, oh, try to, because then that's gonna elevate the conversation. It's gonna go bad.
Yeah, I think you're right when you say like telling your parents this is something important and I want us to have a conversation, not an argument. And also maybe, like I said, setting that like, okay, pause, let me rephrase, but also saying like, if you need to take 5 minutes after we say this, that's okay too. Like setting ground rules for that conversation.
Alrighty. I hope that answers your question, Samantha. Anybody else has a question before we finish? Any final remarks you have, Giselle, before we kind of conclude our event?
So like I said before, it is important for everybody to seek some kind of help. And mental health comes in many forms. If it's going to groups, if it's going to also support groups, right? If it's talking to trusted people in your family, if it's talking to trusted people in your religious beliefs. But I also wanted to kind of talk about New York City does have a hotline that you can call if you want, just like it's a counselor and it's 24/7. So the number is 888 NYC well, like WELL. And so you would type that in. They also have a texting line. So you would text well to 65173. And also you could look up they have a website, so you just look up New York City well, and it comes up there. And so these are people who, it's not because there are like suicide hotlines and different kind of hotlines, but this is also one that's just about counseling in general. And it could be a one-time thing, or I think they would be able to help you find a therapist as well, possibly. And also therapy is usually included in most people's insurance, including Medicaid, Medicare. It's also included in that. So also finding out, and a easy way to do it is you go on Google, you look up counseling or therapy near your house, or near your job or your school, and then just call them and say like, hey, I have X, Y, and Z insurance. Do y'all take this? And they'll either say yes or no. And you kind of go from there. And also, if you are a minor, you would need parental consent, and that can be a parental or legal guardian. But but that's important to put in there too. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That's very helpful. I hope that it was helpful for everybody. I want to thank Giselle for being here with us today. I really appreciate your time and support. I know that, you know, it's Friday night, but we're happy to have you here, and we have learned a lot also. And we hope to be able to connect with you also in the future. If you can share your email, if you want to like collaborate or network also, that could be something that could happen. I also want to emphasize that the reason for this event is to show everybody and to kind of talk about it and know that mental wellness is so important and it's essential for your success. So really, like, everything is connected to your mental health. So if your mental health is not intact, you're not able to, you know, be good at school, be good at your job, be good, good parent, be a good daughter, be a good, you know, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is. So, you know, make sure that you could heal yourself first and try to heal your brain and your mental wellness first before you can try to help others.
Yeah. So my email is matosgiselle48@gmail.com. And so like she said, it's more for networking or things like that, because for therapy, like I gave the number, and also, you know, there's insurance and those kind of things involved with that. But yeah, so I definitely agree that, you know, this is the beginning of a conversation. You know, this is not where it ends here. And just seeking help and support from the people around you and also professionals would be very important for everybody.
Thank you all for being here. Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.